Again, thank you so much for attending to Python4Lib today. And we've got Michelle, who is going to talk about the BlueJ workflow, code and workflow for uploading collections to ArchivesSpace via API. I'm going to put a little link in the chat for these slides. And Michelle has also mentioned that if anyone has questions, feel free to like raise your hand or interrupt. We can kind of do questions on the fly. No need to wait till the end. Thank you. Take it away, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is exciting. So at the beginning, I just put in some project links in case anyone wants to open those up or look at them. And then we already had introductions, but it was the three of us who worked on this project together, starting in like 2022, I think. So it's been it's been like a long project, but not in a bad way. And then here's some links, some archive space reference stuff for the API as well that I looked at a lot. Okay, so kind of the challenge we had in 2022 is there's this huge collection processed by Janelle and some other archivists from Senator Barbara Mikulski. And they had a spreadsheet of 55,000 archival objects to ingest into ArchiveSpace. And there is like a plugin that can ingest from like Excel spreadsheets, but it kind of only does 1,000 rows at a time before it like implodes. So that wasn't a super good option. And since I've used the ArchivesSpace API before and worked with the archives before, we decided that we were going to kind of try to create a workflow to ingest these archival objects via that API. But briefly, what are archival objects? If you're not familiar, hopefully I do okay. Here, archivists, feel free to interrupt me, but it's essentially a component of the larger collection. It can be like a series. To describe a bunch of different archival objects. It can be like an item or it can be like a file folder full of stuff. And it contains like complex hierarchical metadata, including like dates of creation, different kinds of description, different kinds of extents. It might contain things about rights and like if it's private or not to the public. And it can also contain like agents like who created this particular item, the subjects, instances, which in this case are kind of like what box is this in, like the physical instance. I might not be describing that right, but essentially linking out to boxes. And then there can also be like associated digital objects. And those things, the agents, subjects, instance, digital objects, all have their own records and metadata. And to just kind of show what that looks like, I made a little chart. This metadata is made up. When we've created the workflow, after the project was done, I did create some example metadata, and this is from that. So it's like ridiculous. But in this fake land survey that's an archival object, it can have like two subjects or more or none. It could have creators and it can have an instance of a top container. It could also have a digital object. This one doesn't, this made up one doesn't, but it could. And these are all their own records. So in the JSON files, which is what the ArchiveSpace API expects when you upload archival objects, um, it is going to look for the URI for those records. So it's not going to like accept a string. It's going to be like, where is this already in the ArchiveSpace system? So I can link to it for the people, subjects, top containers, etc. And what that means is when you create an archival object, you have to have all of these URIs in advance. They have to already be made and in the system. But when you are creating metadata as an archivist, you aren't necessarily going to ArchiveSpace and looking up every name and URI. That's just like not realistic or practical at all. It's much easier to like add, the subject string that you looked up from LC or the fast heading that you need and just write in the string. And again, here's the relationship from like an actual JSON file, it's just kind of what it looks like and how it references those people and subjects and top containers. So given that it's linking out to these other records, it's not a simple fact of, oh, okay, let's create one script and it will upload all the archival objects. there's kind of more to do because we have to check to see what kinds of entities already exist that we want to link to, and then grab those URIs and then incorporate that into our archival object spreadsheet. So it kind of becomes this multi-step workflow process rather than like a one sort of script situation. So we kind of wanted to create a workflow that we can reuse because this is not the only congressional collection that Johns Hopkins has. There is another very large one, Sarbanes. Is that correct? Okay, that is being processed right now. So we knew that like in the future we would want to like repeat this with other ginormous collections and then potentially to share this workflow depending how it turned out with other archivists at other institutions. So for my perspective, I wanted to make this workflow like pretty accessible to Python beginners. So if you had like an understanding of Python and you were comfortable editing, but maybe not like writing your whole own scripts, and you could run the command line, do some stuff with GitHub, that you'd be comfortable like running this with looking at the instructions and maybe doing some basic troubleshooting. I also wanted to make like flexible workflow. So not all archivists do their archival objects exactly the same. Sometimes they might not have any subjects in archival objects. It's just at a higher collection level. So the ability to skip steps if you need to in the workflow, if they're not what you need, I kind of wanted to have that built in. So it's not just like one giant superscript. It's kind of built into a lot of different scripts to run. And part of that is I just wanted there to be some pauses for manual error checking and review just to make sure everything is going as expected and like as the archivist expected. And then clarity in what the workflow does and does not do, I tried to build in. And then ArchivesSpace itself has a lot of controlled values of lists, like different types of things, like language codes, and just having that be verified. Because as you can imagine, when you're filling out like 55,000 plus rows, you're gonna have a typo or two, and just like if you can validate it, why not? Like check that it makes sense and it wasn't like a typo. Um, so what happened in reality when we did this is we finished the project and we were like, thank goodness that's done. And we're really happy. And then we decided to present about it. And we're like, wow, we should better document what we did because it was like all in Slack conversations. And we presented about this project at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Archive Conference a year or two ago, I think. And at that point, I decided to kind of like go through and document the workflow really well and also create some examples like blank templates for people to look at, and then some example metadata because I didn't want to like directly take from Mikulski's collection. Um, so I decided to use material for MakeDocs, which is like a theme for MakeDocs, which is a static site generator that only uses Markdown. And it's really good because it's like made for project documentation. And I also like that you can like easily clone it. Like if you were interested in using this workflow, but you wanted to change the documentation or change the workflow slightly, you could still have this as a starting point and just borrow it. And it also like has a built-in way to link out to GitHub that just stays at the top of the site the whole time, and I really appreciate that. So here are like the basic workflow steps overall, and this is kind of how the make docs are organized. Um, and we'll kind of go through this, but you end up with a lot of steps, and within those steps, there's more steps. But this overview of steps is like me trying to simplify it so it doesn't seem so terrifying when you start it. Um, so the first thing is going to be the setup. So let me switch to this other screen and let me know if you can see this. So this is the MakeDoc website. And here we have our workflow steps. And again, it's just exactly like this. So first you're just going to clone the repo with all the scripts in it. And then from ArchivesSpace, there is a controlled value list that you can export as a CSV. So you're going to export that from your ArchivesSpace instance. You're going to name it this random name I decided upon, and then you're going to put it in a specific folder. And then you're going to create some secret files, which is to authenticate into ArchivesSpace. And then you're going to create a blank CSV called already existing entities.csv. And don't worry about that for now. And then at that point, you're gonna start filling out the templates, or if you already have metadata in a spreadsheet, transfer it to kind of this format. And there is a CSV template for each different kind of thing. So you have your archival object template, um, which is a CSV with very specific columns that you can fill out, and it has very specific formatting. So these are all formatted in the same way if you have subfields. So for instance, dates are fun where there are a lot of different subfields in the date field, and these have to go together. So essentially we created like a format where you have the subfield equals the value, and then these like demarcate between the different subfields, and then this means you can repeat it. So our repeat delimiter is the pipe. So if you wanted to have more than one entry for dates, but still have all these subfields, you can pipe and then do another entry. Sorry, I'm losing my voice apparently. And a lot of things for archival objects are like this. But I just tried to make it as readable as possible. And this is kind of like where I really was talking to Kristen and Janelle and being like, does this make any sense? Will people be able to fill this out? And of course, when you're first filling it out, you are going to be doing the strings for the linked agent. So instead of having this URI, you're going to be filling it out with strings. And again, this has two subfields. It has what role it is and then what the ref is. But at first, you're going to have this equal a string when you're filling it out. So this is kind of what a template looks like. And then down here, I have more information about each column that you can look through. Um, and if anything like is drawing from a controlled list, kind of like how that works. Um, and then also, let's go back to the archival object. If it's like a Boolean, like a true false, and if it's a string. And again, we have templates for each different kind of object that can be linked out. So for persons, they have different fields. And different columns. The column names, though, are all kind of based on the ArchivesSpace form GUI. So, like the archivist, if they're filling out something manually, there are forms in ArchivesSpace. So I tried to make the column headings match that as much as possible. And I also like put that information in here. Like, here's the equivalent. Most of the time it's pretty obvious because it's like pretty much the same, but sometimes like the JSON field is really different. So just making sure that um, you know kind of like what is expected. Okay, so after you fill out your CSV templates, you're going to manually create the collection in ArchivesSpace and then use that URI within your templates. I'm not going to go into detail about that part, but it's just making sure that the archival objects are associated with the right collection. And then the next steps, and this is kind of for all of these different types of entities, I wrote Python scripts to get all of like the corporate entities, the persons, families, and subjects that you have in your ArchivesSpace instance. And I tried to write them all that they were all like formatted in the same way. So if we look here, I have a folder called Get Existing Entities, and you will go through and for each different kind of entity you have, you'll run this, and this will allow you to like get a spreadsheet at the end that's like all persons with the date CSV, and these are all the people you currently have in ArchivesSpace, and it will give like the full name and the URI. So after you get all of those, you will use a script that I wrote, and it's in this folder called helping scripts, which are scripts that are like not directly interacting with ArchivesSpace, but help you with the process. So this is like matching names. So in this one, for instance, if they filled out the person template and they have these names, they'll go and see which ones are in all persons, and using like a pandas merge in that script I just showed you, the URI will pop up. Oops, sorry. If it finds it. And I do recommend in the workflow that you do manually review this because sometimes over time, like names get added dates or they might change like slightly, and you just want to check to make sure that like the name you have maybe there's like a typo in the one in ArchivesSpace or a typo in yours. So just manually scanning and making sure that any close matches aren't actually the same person. Um, and then at that point, you could do this programmatically or not. Any URIs, any good matches you find, you're going to add it to that existing entity spreadsheet. And all the agents, which are like people, families, corporate bodies, the agent name will go here. And then for subject names, we'll go here, and you're adding URIs. So at the end of this process, you'll have all your existing entities in this CSV. And then you'll just delete them from either the matches or the person template, the ones that match. So then you have only unpublished or things not in archive space in this spreadsheet. And at that point, you can create the new entities. So each, again, each different kind of entity has its own script. And each script creates the JSON records on your computer. That's the first option. If you don't feel confident in running it in archive space yet. And then the second option posts the JSON records to archive space. And it can either post it to your sandbox instance or your production instance. And this just allows like a lot of opportunities to actually look at the records before they get ingested and make sure everything's as you would expect it. So let's just take a look at this one really quick. So this is like the post people um, agents, and when it reads the CSV, it turns it into a data frame, and then we go through that data frame, go through each row and create a JSON record. I have a lot of like specific functions that I've written into this script called extract values. And extract values essentially is the place where the controlled values are validated. And that's pulling from this enumeration CSV. So these are all the controlled values in archive space. There are literally a ton. I'm only using the ones relevant to this process, but just having them all be exported from archive space is awesome. And so then it's just checking based on whatever function it is and making sure that it has, if it's a Boolean, that it has a true or false. And if the true or false is like just a string somehow, fixing that. Also just checking that if it's the controlled value is correct. Checking to make sure it has all the subfields that are required. Um, so not controlled means like you can put anything, and then Boolean values means it has to be true or false. Note type values is pulling from that controlled list. So this is kind of, they all work like this. They all go back to this extract values.py, which goes back to this enumeration. So for all of these, is kind of how it works. And I tried to share functions over, like for instance, dates in like people and corporate agents are pretty much exactly the same. So the function is shared between those two scripts. Um, so yeah, and then they all just do the same process of either creating JSON files and saving those to your computer so you can look through them, or posting, depending on what you need. And this is also where your like secret files are going to be. Let's see. Okay. And then at the end, it creates a log for you that will have all of the URIs of the newly created entities in it. And then the next step, and I'm skipping steps 7 through 8 for digital objects because that works exactly like the archival objects. You would run this script called find and replace strings with URIs. Um, and right now, this is using, well, actually, I think it would be better if I show you. Let's see. So if we go to this step in the workflow, update digital object template, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create like a folder somewhere and add your already existing entities to that folder, and then add all of your logs in here as well. And then in your terminal, you're going to like run this like command essentially, run Python, the script, what the file name is called. So if it's for digital objects, it'll be a copy of your digital object spreadsheet. And I just recommended a copy in case anything goes horribly wrong. But and again, here it's the same. It's going to be a copy of your archival object template, and then where that folder is. I always put the folders on my desktop, but what the directory is. And then that will create a with replacements version of your spreadsheet that has all URIs instead of the string. So it goes through and replaces all of those. And then at that point, you can post your archival objects and kind of following the same method. You might want to look at the JSON first, you might not. Definitely want to test in your sandbox. And I do have a section about testing the scripts here. So kind of like the basics of the create entity scripts and how to run them and kind of common errors that might occur, like JSON errors, API errors, key index errors, and kind of like what those might mean. Based on my experience, definitely not perfect, but just kind of tips about how to run each of these. Okay, go back. And then after you kind of like run this replacement script, which again just like replaces the string with the URIs, I would recommend visually scanning the CSV just to make sure that you get every single one and that they all are URIs now. It would be bad if you missed some. And we like, I think the first time we did it, I like looked through and there was like one or two names that were just still in the spreadsheet. So I went through and like figured out what happened there. Yep, and then post archival objects. And then finally, plans for improvement. I want to add like UV to this to just kind of make it easier because like right now um, I don't have like that going on. So for all of the importing things that could get out of whack for the package management and stuff like that. Right now, the find and replace script that I ended up writing for this workflow, I changed it a bit from our original Mikulski import. And right now it relies on like string substitutions, which is totally fine, but we do sometimes have like repeating things in a row. And so I just want to make sure that, like, for instance, if there is a subject that is, I don't know, cats, and then there's another subject that's like cats in outer space, that we aren't like only replacing a subsection of the string. We, I don't think I don't think you could go through the process and not notice that happened if you visually scan the spreadsheet afterwards, because then you just have random parts of strings floating in that. But I do want to rewrite that to make it like completely foolproof. And again, I don't think that was the exact script I used on Mikulski in case Kristen and Janelle are panicking right now. But no, I swear that it's it's normally pretty good. But yeah, that presentation was a little shorter than I thought it would be, but if people have questions or things they want me to go through more, I don't know if Kristen and Janelle have anything to add, not to put you on the spot, but yeah, that's kind of what we've got for now. Um, yep.
Very cool. I had one question that kind of popped into my mind. Is there, did you build in any sort of like error logging along the way, for when those like string replacements might not have worked quite right, or when there was still something in there? Or does like the API kind of let you know, like, is there an error code for that already built in, or what was your approach there?
Yeah, so the API yells at you for some particular things, but there's no clear documentation of what it will yell at you for. So it's just kind of like random in my experience. It definitely does yell at you if you don't have all the required fields filled out that ArchivesSpace requires. Um, but it will also just like if you have a URL where a string's supposed to be, it will probably take that, like it's or a true or false where a string's supposed to be. So it doesn't yell at you for everything. Um, so the main thing that it was checking for these. So for instance, I'll go to the people one. Um, I had a function for single string values that made sure it was a single string value, add a controlled term, and then the like particular functions for the subfield ones, it made sure it had like the correct subfields. Like if you have a typo in your subfield, it will yell at you, the script will, and being like, that's not a real field for like the notes field. Like if you have instead of all the notes have like a subfield called content where the actual note goes. And if you wrote context or something, it would be like that that's not right. So I have some of that built in. It's not perfect, but I did the best I can to try to catch a lot of it. And
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. That's really clever. Thanks.
Michelle, I had a similar question to David. So, do you have a log? Like you create a log file as things process so you can check back what went wrong, or does your most of your scripts just completely stop and give you an error
Mm,
if they find something that went wrong?
yeah, so right now, they will print the errors to the terminal that they find when it's like creating of the JSON part. And when you run it against the API, it's kind of the same way. Like the script always keeps going, is kind of been my philosophy, but it prints out when things went wrong. Unless it's an error I didn't expect that breaks the whole thing. But in general, I try to account to that. So, for instance, for posting, if it gets like a JSON decode error, which is generally when there's like a login problem or another sort of issue that comes up, maybe the URL isn't quite right, um, that will like have an error. Um, or if there is a key error, that will also post. But it does like keep going. Oh yeah, and I do create a log for all the posting ones at the end. There's also even a log that is created for the JSON when it just creates them on your computer, and that just says where they are and what their file names are. Um, so like where it put the the records.
Thank you for sharing. I just have experience with uh, somewhat similar Python utility for the Islandora world, and sometimes people over the years, it's been several years, so a few people contributing to it. They have a ongoing log that you sometimes have to go back. Where did it fail? And what was the reason?
Mm.
Because you could have be loading hundreds of files, and you want to get a sense, okay, which ones failed, which ones did not, and to see if you need to, restart a batch. So, and this it takes effort to do all of that, and I don't expect you to have any of that. But sounds like you picked some good defaults.
Yeah, it like definitely tries the log always like prints like what the title or something about the row that's unique. That way I can go back and find that row in particular and like what went wrong. So for instance, if something goes wrong, it'll like for the people like post the agent name. And I'm not sure what it is for archival objects, but yeah, it'll be like the title for the archival object, which is like the name of the object. So I can go through and like find that title in the spreadsheet and be like, why didn't this one work? Um, yeah. And for some of the errors too. Let's see. Yeah, so like add single string value. Um, this like has like the row name, the dictionary name, the JSON field, value from CSV. So the value from CSV is going to be the column name. If they have like a typo in that, it's going to print this field was not found in the CSV. Like this column header doesn't exist in this template. And that could just be like, instead of name all lowercase, you put an uppercase N at the beginning, and then it will yell at you for that. Um, and for validating the field values, um, this also has some errors. So I found sometimes if you didn't have the right delimiters between those subfields, like one equal mark instead of two equal marks, it will give you errors back because it's not finding what it's expecting when it's trying to split up those values. And so it will print values like, hey, in this field, there's a bad value here, or this subfield doesn't exist in this bigger field. So what's going on there? So it does try to print out different things. Um, and yell at you. And for specific ones, like instances, it would be like not found in the instance subfield. So I tried to do that as issues came up. I don't know if I did it systematically at all points. But yeah.
I had,
I I've
oh,
got
I
a
think
question.
Tommy, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Is I'm curious about the decision or the, I guess, non-decision of using Archive Snake for the authentication bit, because I find that to be helpful. I don't know, maybe it wasn't on your radar, because you're using the secrets file that you have to plug in the values for. Just curious if you thought about doing that.
Yeah, I looked at Archive Snake a little bit.
Hmm.
I kind of I know Archive Snake, at least my impression of it is it does more than authentication. You can
Yes,
also use it to
yes.
grab objects and stuff. I
Yeah,
guess it didn't occur to me to use it just for the authentication bit. I was like, oh, it's either all or nothing. Either use it for everything or not. So I ended up not doing it. And I think it was also a little bit based on the fact that like my old ArchivesSpace scripts also didn't use it. So I was like
yeah.
familiar already with the authentication
Right. Yeah,
method from
if you've
before.
got your little way to do it, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, I know it's pretty cool though, so it's something to think about. I also though wonder if it would make it more complicated for people, but I'm not sure how the authentication works on Archive Snake.
It's
Because like some
essentially the
of
same
the
thing. You make a secret file in it and
oh,
you do that.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you're using a good pattern, that's for sure. No,
yeah,
this is
it's
great. Thank you for all this.
oh, no problem. My predecessor in my role, Eric Hansen, who's at MIT, he was like the one that set up the authentication in like really early archive-based scripts we worked on together, and it always works. So I've just kept them for like literally everything I've ever done.
Yeah,
Kind of like the same setup.
it's a good plan. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I put this one in chat, but maybe I'll just voice it. It might be easier to kind of explain and whatever. So I'd had a question that might be more for Janelle and Kristen. I was wondering if like this code and workflow has changed your approach to working within archive space. With the smaller default limit, did you have to like just do some descriptions like smaller chunks at a time and then take the time to do more archive space upload type of stuff? Like can you now provide a greater focus on the collection as a whole, or has it changed your work life, I guess?
I can start, and Janelle, feel free to, of course, jump in. Um, yeah, I think an interesting thing about this collection was that there had been no consideration of the ingest during the processing of it. So part of this project was not only um, associating certain types of records in A-space with each other through Michelle's scripts, but also getting the unformatted raw data to into the templates that Michelle geniusly created for us to even like create archival objects to begin with. And so I think kind of my question this whole time was like, there is already an import template in the PUI of A-Space to import collections. Um, and I think if we hadn't had Michelle's expertise and guidance, that's where we would have been. We would have been dividing this up into 55, however many hundred, I don't know, bad at math. We would have had to break it up and use the existing PUI staff ingest tools available to us. And luckily, like working with Michelle for so long, a lot of the helping scripts that she mentioned were things that we had already kind of been familiar with using to just export data generally. I think the thing about this project was then um, linking all of these associated records together in one collection. So it's definitely changed, how I view the back end of A-Space, working more with JSON records. I will also say that as somebody who doesn't use Python day to day, I find that working with Michelle in this project or in our ongoing work in collaborating is the best way for me to to work with Python. Like I to raise my own proficiency. I've taken classes on Python, as I can, but devoid or absent of a project like this, a tangible kind of real world project, it doesn't stick as much. So I think, as Michelle kind of alluded to at the beginning, if I am set up, and I know how to authenticate in the command line to the API, and I can start testing the scripts and letting Michelle know like what feedback or like errors I'm getting, and then I get more familiar just in doing that, where I can start being like, okay, I know I can recognize the errors and kind of correlate them to the record. So I think that's been a really good way of raising our department proficiency just by us assisting and providing Michelle with kind of our requirements for the records. But yeah, I think moving forward, we have this need of large congressional papers collections. So I think that was like, we want to invest the time now and not kind of, it's kind of a cautionary tale of like, don't start processing a collection with 55,000 files and not think about the ingest process. So now, thanks so much to Michelle and Janelle, and Michelle's documentation, we can hopefully avoid that moving forward. I do think day to day, we are more so using kind of like Sarah mentioned in the chat, these scripts kind of for more discrete purposes. And I think it's kind of for these larger collections that we like unite them together for this broader, ingest process. So yeah, that's kind of a winding answer. I don't know, Janelle, how you feel.
I thought that was a good answer. I would just add that Mikulski was a rather unique collection for us at that point. Not just because it was so, so very big, but also because there was a lot of very complex metadata that had to be attached to each archival object. It wasn't just, here's the title and here are the dates, and that's it. We also needed to add, there were a lot of restrictions attached to this collection. And so each individual file needed to be able to indicate what are the restrictions on that file. Because the nature of the collection meant we couldn't just impose those at a higher level in like series description or subseries description. So we had that complexity that we needed to add. Plus, we had a lot of rich information about which staffers contributed to which files. And because a lot of the files were poorly named, like we had hundreds of folders that were just titled notes. And so we wanted to attach subject metadata to individual files to make them actually usable for researchers so that they wouldn't be searching through hundreds of boxes for the notes that are relevant to their particular research question. So being able to attach all of those pieces, the scripts were necessary for that as well, as opposed to trying to use like the smaller existing importer and trying to add in all of those pieces in all, 55, 56 of those batches that we would have had to run. So yeah, it wasn't just that it was a really, really, really big collection to import. It was also extremely complex. So we really needed a new way of doing things. And because we have all of this set up, we have two more congressional collections that are currently being processed. And so we were able to set up right from the start, okay, here is going to be the workflow for getting them into ArchivesSpace. We can have that planned from the very beginning and make sure that we don't have to go through all of this work again to, reinvent the wheel. So that's kind of the big context around this collection and why we chose to do it this way. I am now an accessioning archivist, so I'm not working with these scripts anymore day to day in the way that Kristen might, because she's a processing archivist and does work on a lot of the bigger collections. So, Kristen has a better idea of like how this is changing our workflows from here on out. But we are definitely reusing these scripts for other congressional collections, just in as a planned thing from the beginning.
That's very cool. It sounds like, Michelle, you were able to handle a lot of nuance in the metadata that, that your archivists were able to create. And I just wanted to unpack something Kristen mentioned as well, that like sometimes working on projects like these are really important for just building up proficiency across the library, right? I'm one of those, lone Python tinkerers at my library, and I think having someone to work on projects like this can really help you understand Python on a deeper level where you've got an actual project to learn. So for anyone out there, if you're, learning Python, you might want to ask around your library to see if there are projects where you can work on things with people. So that's kind of in part with uh, what this group is meant to be as well. How do we learn Python? And I think I just wanted to highlight that. Awesome. Uh, any other questions, I guess?
I had a question and a comment. I'd have to hear back on the process of converting to UV to see how that experience is, since a lot of us
Yeah.
are still new at UV. And maybe we can figure things out together or just report back when you've magically solved it all. Um, I, from my experience with a similar tool or just general good software design principles, I would suggest adding unit tests to some of the functions in case you keep adding features in the future so you can catch if there's been any bugs introduced.
Mm. Do you have like a good starting point to for unit testing or any resources? And it's okay if you don't. I just haven't done anything like that before, I don't think.
No. But this could be a good presentation to talk
Yeah,
about.
that's true.
I did give a presentation on PyTest.
PyTest? Okay, yeah,
There's a
I'll have to look for
slide.
that.
I'll dig up the link.
Okay. Sorry, I keep forgetting I'm screen share. I guess I can probably stop, but um
Give me a few seconds. I'll look for the link. Yeah, it's my first presentation in this group. And
Mhm.
let's see. Sorry, still looking for it.
oh no, you're good.
No problem. Um, Yeah, just to give a voice to some of the comments as well. Kenny mentioned, or vibe code in some unit tests down the road. That's possible.
That's something
Or
else I was thinking. Yeah,
a
exactly.
way to
Yeah.
start it. Emma mentioned, thanks for the presentation. Really impressed by the project and especially the documentation. Yeah, the documentation was great too. I thought it was really intuitive. And that was just all through the make docs.
Yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
it's really cool. I also feel like the theme material, if you search for that, there's like even more documentation.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I feel like it's pretty intuitive how to write, and it was really nice for me.